the latest stats now show, I think they were out just last year, that 22% of primary one children are now obese, and of that 22%, 70% of those, of the 21%, are from poorer backgrounds. So not only are we not doing enough, we're regressing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with those stats, that's for sure. They are legit. I think the difficulty when it comes to trying to address obesity or overweight in a population, be it children, adolescents, young people, whatever, is that most societal issues such as this, people feel can get resolved within school. And yes, school has a role to do to educate kids, but not to solve society's problems. That's not what schools are designed to do. It's a teaching and learning hub. That's its job. In order to address things like obesity, things like increasing the regular daily activity that kids do is the easiest solution, but it's not as simple as that. We have to also think about, you know, the quality of food, advertising that's on social media, YouTube stations and so on, where they're praying to the kids, you know, go and ask mum and dad for something sugary or something quick fixing or whatever. And the quality of life in general is not supporting the government's wish to reduce obesity and overweight in childhood population. Because things like a Happy Meal, for example, is cheaper than most other, let's say, better, more quality meals, the low-income families who don't have a great deal of money, especially with the cost of living crisis that we're currently going through, it's much easier for them to put a Happy Meal in their kid, to know that they fed their kid, because they don't want to be neglective parents. So it's a much bigger problem than just making kids physically active. I think there's something called the 24-hour movement behaviours. I think it's much more about educating parents and supporting parents. How do I actually achieve those guidelines for my child? Because that's where you can address health as a lifestyle overall, not just for those who are overweight or obese, but the entire population. But I think daily physical education would make a huge difference, because for many kids, that's the only activity they get. Because when they go home, typically they'll follow suit with what mum and dad's behavioural traits are and habits are and mould into that. It sounds a really callous thing to say, but overweight kids often have overweight parents. And as I said earlier on, the environment has a huge influence on you. So if you're shaped by parents who sit in front of TV at night time after dinner and that's all they do, then that's what you think is normal.
Learned behaviour.
Yeah, it's just learned behaviour, correct. So I think there are lots of educational things we need to do and be better at doing to make parents better informed about making the right choices for their kids, and then doing what we can to support the parents and their kids to make the right decision. And we're not doing that nearly enough, which is why the numbers are getting bigger rather than getting smaller.
There was a lot to cover in that. So if you're a family that perhaps is from a deprived background and you've got generational issues going back, how do we save that child, the child who's 3 or 4 just now? Their parents perhaps don't know, don't care, aren't interested. How as a society do we try and help that? Because the only way we're going to try and fix it is from the ground up, which is the children.
I'm not going to deny that. I think, again, for me, it's a funding issue more than anything else. Mm-hmm. We seem to put more funding into primary and secondary education than we do in preschool education. And yet those first 5 years are probably the most informative years of a child's life. So if we want to break the cycle, if we want to actually deal with it, we've got to put more funding into the preschool years. And I mean from 0 through to 5, through to when school begins. And that is by not just educating parents, but by supporting parents to be able to make the right decisions. There are lots of great organisations out there that are trying really hard to provide opportunities for parents of low-income families as well as just families in general. But there's not enough of them, and they're not supported enough to really do the job that we want to do to make those numbers change and go the other way. I mean, we don't even measure physical fitness in our kids in schools, and yet most other European countries do. I think, well, why are we not doing that? To get a measure of where we're at just now, because that helps us provide a blueprint to then do exactly what you're suggesting, make a difference. But if we're not measuring where the actual problems are, then we're not putting the right things in place to make the changes that need to be made to achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve. I definitely think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, as you say, from the root up.